Welcome to the Tilted Halo. This is a new podcast, and it's for anybody who's a woman in ministry. You might be a pastor like myself, a bishop, a priest, a rabbi, music minister, elder, children's minister, whatever your title is. You're absolutely in the right place, especially if you're someone who loves your ministry and you're doing it well and you're feeling pressure to sometimes be perfect, and deep down inside, you know you're not. And how in the world to deal with that? And men, you're absolutely welcome here too, because this is about ministry and the same thing can happen to you. So you're all in the right place. Let's get started with the show. Welcome to another episode of the Tilted Halo. I've recently had a couple of conversations with other women in ministry, and I've been struck by something, because so many of them, well, really every single one of them that I've talked with, and this has been like 4 or 5 women. No, it hasn't been 25 or something, but 4 or 5 who I've called specifically about something. And what I've called about is been inviting them to be part of something that would require maybe 1 hour a week and 15 minutes per day. So not a huge chunk of time, 1 hour per week and maybe 15 minutes a day. And every single one of them has told me, I'm so busy, I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I can fit one more thing in. And I get it to a point. I get it that we're busy. I get the demands of the work. I get the 24/7, 365. I get that there's always somebody more to visit, another thing to study, another thing to write, another meeting to go to, another. Yes, I get it. But what I don't get is not taking time for yourself. And I've heard these comments from women who are serving congregations, but also from a woman who's a bishop, remembering her time in a congregation. That the times to get together, even if it's once a month, to do something, to get together with other women in ministry, or for men, for you to get together. And it may not just be women, but it could be a group of women and men in ministry, to not just have a gripe session. No, not just support. That's important. But to have some time together to be a human being, to share some of the struggles, because we can't go sharing a lot of that with our families. We can't share it with other members of the congregation by any means. We need to be able to lean on each other. And yet so many of us so often just tough it out. Just tough it out, kind of like a Lone Ranger. That old TV show, The Lone Ranger. And yeah, I know all the controversies with Tonto and all of that kind of stuff. And Native Americans. And I don't mean to diminish that. But even the Lone Ranger had someone else there. And so many times, though, as women in ministry especially, we're so used to having to do it all, to be all for everyone, and that's a cultural thing, that we don't give ourselves time. We don't put ourselves in any place except last place as far as what we need to nourish ourselves. And the camaraderie, the support, the learning from, how we can lean on each other that comes from being part of a group, whether it's something local where you actually physically get together, maybe just once a month. I was part of a group like that for a number of years. And man, it was so important to me. It was so important to be there, to share with others who were in ministry. And it was a group of women as well as men, but it was mostly women in the group. And we shared the struggles. We could hear the wisdom from each other. We could get the support from each other, not there, you poor soul. No, that was never done. But we could get support from each other. And we could hear some other perspectives. We could get some new ideas by being a part of a group like that. Actually, I've been part of a group like that twice. The first time I was in the first couple of years of my ministry in a congregation, and I was running up against something that I did not understand. I had been in these two small congregations for at least 5 years by that time, and it seemed like anything I suggested, anything I tried, anything that was a possibility was going nowhere. Nowhere. I suggested a long-range planning committee. And I got these blank stares like, why do we need a long-range planning committee? What would we need to plan for? I mean, literally, that's what was said. They had no concept of long range, no concept of anything like that. And it just frustrated the daylights out of me. Because to me, that I had been there long enough that, yeah, we needed to start looking a little further down the road than just next week, next month, and maybe next year. And being a part of a pastor's group, I was the only woman in that group, by the way, that time, because there were still not many women in ministry back then. But just being there and hearing from others as to what they were struggling and going through, I knew I was no longer alone. I knew I could share what I needed to share. I knew that there were people there who cared about me, who would be there if I needed and wanted to talk, and when I needed and wanted to talk. It wasn't until after I left those first two congregations that I began to really understand what was going on when they said, long-range planning? Why do we need a long-range planning committee? It was something that was never taught to me in seminary. And that is that I was in what was called a first call congregation or parish, because there was two congregations. And that meant that throughout their history, they had pastors who would come and be there maybe 3 years, maybe 5 years, at the very most 5 years, and then move on. And so they got used to this rhythm, and they got used to the idea that after about 3 years, the pastor was going to be leaving, and so they would be starting all over again with somebody new. And so when I got there, and I was still there at 5 years, and I actually was there for 7.5 years, it felt like I was beating my head against a brick wall. It was so frustrating. Nothing seemed to be important except the day-to-day, keep going. They even had one of the older members of one of the congregations asked me if I was going to be leaving soon. And my response was I had no plans to leave yet. Didn't know what would happen down the future, but I had no plans to leave yet. I didn't realize they didn't know what to do with that. They did not know what to do with that. And neither did I, because I didn't know what was happening. But being part of a group of, in the one case, it was just all men and myself, but it was multiple denominations. We got together and once a month and just had some breathing space to be human beings and to share some of the struggles we were going through. And then there was a time also during that time where the women of my denomination in that part of the state I was in got together maybe once a quarter or so. And that was also important for me to be there with other sisters in ministry because there were unique challenges that we could talk about. Talking about being the only one, the discouraging things that were said to us, the fact of not getting the opportunities to move as quickly as our male colleagues would be getting to move, the opportunities that were given to us versus the bigger opportunities that were given to our male colleagues and classmates that we had gone through seminary with. It is so important, ladies, women, that we have the time and that we take the time, that we feel that we are important enough to care about ourselves. Nobody else is going to do it for us. I can guarantee you that. Some wise people may say, hey, you need to take care of some things. You need to go and get some support. Yes, some wise members might do that, especially these days they might. But there's so many people who have no concept of that, who wouldn't even think about that. We have to be able to say, this is what I need. This is what I feel is important. And I am worth it. Think about those words. I am worth it. I am worth it. 4 words. 4 very, very important words. Are you worth it? Do you really believe that? Do you believe you are worth the time in your schedule, once a month, once a week, whatever it is, to be with someone where you can be yourself, where you can get the support, the encouragement, the understanding that you need? Because if you don't believe it about yourself, chances are nobody else is going to believe it about you either. That's a tough statement. If you don't believe it about yourself, the chances are just about 0 that anybody else is going to believe it about you either, that you're worth that. You got to claim that and hold on to it for dear life. And for some days, it is for dear life. You and I, we are stronger together as women in ministry, but also as women and men in ministry. We need our male colleagues. Men, you need us in your midst too, to hear the women's perspective, not just from your spouse perhaps, but from the perspective of a woman in ministry, to see how we see things, how we understand the ministry too, how we understand the the issues, the problems that are there. Because I can guarantee you it's probably going to be a different perspective than yours. So you need us too. And we need you. It's a wonderfully complicated web that we are part of together, even though some of you may not like spiders, but a web of love of God's planning. Let's put it to you that way. No spiders involved, but a web of God's love and planning. So just think about that. Find a group. And if you can't find one, think about creating one. Or call me. Call me. I'm serious about that. There's ways here to get in touch with me. Reach out. Don't be a lone ranger out there. It's too lonely anyway. Don't add that to the weight that you're carrying. We need each other as women in ministry. And if we're too busy to take time for ourselves, we're too busy for the people we're serving. That's a strong statement too. If we're too busy to take care of ourselves, we're too busy to really take time for the people we're serving. And sometimes that busyness we use to mask the loneliness. Sometimes we use it to mask our own feelings of insecurity. I know that because I've done that. And I don't want you doing that. That's not a really good place to be. It doesn't feed your soul and it doesn't feed the people you're serving. So think about that. Reach out. Don't be the Lone Ranger. We are stronger together. We're not called to go it alone. That's not who God created us to be. Not to be isolated, not to be the only ones. So until the next time, and there is the next one coming, so don't go anywhere. Come back next week at the same time. I'm looking forward to seeing you. Take care. You have been listening to Tilted Halo with me, Kathleen Panning. What did you think about this episode? I'd really like to hear from you. Leave me some comments. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share this episode. And catch another upcoming episode for more conversation on ministry, life, mindset, and a whole lot more. Go to www.tiltedhalohelp.com, where I've got a resource guide and other resources waiting for you. And be sure to say hi to me, Kathleen Panning, on LinkedIn. See you on the next episode.